Thanks for joining us, Jodi. On the back of the white paper that we've produced, your expertise covers most of the topics, to be honest, that we're covering. But how have you found 2020 in terms of your personal work style, but also the businesses you've worked with?
So we deployed to home working at the end of February, early March. First of all, we thought we were going to do it as a sort of test the technology. And it just so happened with the way everything worked and snowballed that we all ended up staying at home. But then as the time passed, we all, I guess, had to be really agile, really empathetic. We had to understand what individual members of the team's needs were, as well as what the needs of the business were to continue to serve our customers in the way that they were used to. But it's just about continuous communication, I guess, with your customers and with your team. And for our team, my God, during COVID, we had so many different instances to deal with. Individually, the team members had different aspects of COVID to deal with, but we seemed to gel really quickly. We actually interviewed and inducted new members into the team, which you just get on with doing, don't you? It's not what you normally do, but you find ways to make it work and make it happen for both parties. It wasn't just about me saying, right, we'll do this every morning and then this every evening. It was about us collectively coming together to discuss ways of working that worked for what we had to do and for individuals in the team. Some people came on and never put the cameras on because they didn't feel comfortable to. Right. Other people who are perhaps more extrovert actually really relished the team meets and the camera and the sort of extracurricular activities that we put on for people to do.
With ourselves, we noticed that it was like 6 or 7 weeks in before got a proper chair in, rather than the kitchen chair. And we're seeing some companies are then now providing stipends for employees to make sure that they have the correct setup. Is that something you've taken on? Have you guys decided that, right, we're in this for the long term, so how do we make sure everyone gets set up properly at home?
So quite early on, we set up a programme where people could request kit that we either took from the office or we bought for them.
I think myself and my partner, we've found we're sometimes working slightly late and working random hours because of just trying to fit stuff in. Is that the case for you? You quite flexible?
We took the decision really early on that aspect of it is really important for people and for their well-being. So we allowed them time to be able to do that. I also had a guy on the team who he's got a couple of medical conditions within his family, and his way of dealing with that was to have a very structured day for them and with them, but then also to carve out an hour's time in the day for him to go off and have a run. So I absolutely encouraged him to do that because it was his mechanism of fresh air, turning things around in his mind, slotting what he needed to do and how he was going to do it, keeping his energy levels up. So absolutely, go off, do your run, program it into your day so you've got time for yourself and really enjoy that time, really precious time.
We've always been like that, always getting involved in things like that, but I think even more so now we're encouraging it even more because it actually, the productivity goes up, but it's your health and well-being. It's just huge, isn't it? And sometimes I actually don't go out for a day or two, and I can actually feel the difference.
Exactly what you were both saying. It's it's that mental space. It's the I often joke you can be more productive in the mountains than you can at a desk. You're figuring out problems, you're solving things. Like you just said there, Pete, it's the productivity will go up because you're getting that freedom to work the way that works best for you.
I think as well, for me, it's killed presenteeism. Presenteeism for me was, it's not unique to Britain, but I think it was a very British thing to commute, whether you're driving a long way or you're on a train. And I look at my own time and I think, technically, I'm one of the owners and founders of the company, and technically I can be completely flexible, but I wasn't. I was putting myself under massive pressure. I was on trains, and I look at what I'd have done this morning. I'd have probably already had an hour and a half's travel. Going back to Jodi's point about, routines and creating routines, one thing I fear slightly, or not fear, but work that needs to be done is how do you get the right routines post-COVID when you have got part hybrid, you've got the people who want to come into an office and have a meeting, but really there's people who are working remotely now that need to be in that meeting.
We used to have a hell of a lot of meetings for the sake of meetings almost. So it's been quite nice to work without necessarily scheduling a meeting. In my team, I had people who were absolutely enormously committed, but at very different stages in their experience and career. So for me, as a leader, it was about being agile to their needs. In our place, you can see when people are busy and when they're available. But what my team tend to find really useful was they could see when I was available, I'm available, and they could jump in and they could either text me, email me, pick the phone up, do a quick Skype call. And we just had a nicer hybrid of lots of different things going on in the day rather than meeting. I always made a point of when we were in the office, first thing I would do in the morning when I arrived was go and spend time, say good morning to the team. That interaction in the office, we almost sort of replicated as a really important connector in the day, but just did it differently.
Mm-hmm. What about things like incidental learning? You mentioned people with different levels of experience in your team. Quite often they might have seen more experienced people that they're not in a training session, but they just pick things up from that person, or that person spots things that they need help with. How have you managed to overcome those kind of potential gaps?
So yeah, when you sit in quite close proximity as a team, it's just a matter of head over the monitor, isn't it? Can I just ask? Or you actually wander over and sit down and say, can I just borrow you for a minute, don't you? I do encourage my not to let anything fester. And if there's something that they need there and then, find a way to ask the question. Other people might need you to set up something with a little bit more shape, or to get some introductions, or put them on a bit of a path to help them just get started. So there's lots of ways you can do it.
That's where the listening comes in. You're not necessarily going to give advice to say, what is it you want to achieve, or how do you want to develop, or is there something bothering you, and you're that sounding board for them to take on. And that's where like the reverse mentoring comes in as well, because you're learning about them, especially when in a hierarchy. If you're at the top end of the spectrum, they're the bottom, it's an opportunity for you to learn what's going on at that bottom end of my organisation.
Just as you were saying that, I was thinking about members of the team who were really lots and loads of really valuable knowledge, but almost no confidence to share that knowledge. So they perhaps would have with customers, but then may not have necessarily done it in a collaborative or in a team format. And mentoring, I've seen mentoring really build people's confidence in finding a voice. And on the flip side, I volunteered to do some interviewing for apprentices. One particular lad, I remember, he was so nervous, absolutely dreading this, practice interview session, and he couldn't get his words out. He had no real understanding of how to demonstrate transferable skills. So eventually, to get him comfortable and settled, I asked him what he liked doing. So then we got talking about fishing, and he came alive. And we then sort of discussed was how that enthusiasm and that knowledge of fishing, and some of the answers that he was giving to me about fishing, how we could use that in an interview scenario to answer some of the work-based questions that he was going to be asked. And he kind of went away, like, instead of being all tangled up in knots, feeling, all right, so I have got some really valuable skills and really valuable experiences that I can talk about.
The youngsters of the world, some are on Zoom at the moment at school, some aren't, some are physically in school. They're going to be looking for jobs or university places or college places, whatever it might be. What do you think we need to do, and what do you think we have done? What have you seen done well?
So I don't know if you've rung up your bank recently, but I have. And I've said to the guy at the other end, "Are you at home? I can hear your dog. What's your dog called?" And he got all a bit like, "Oh, I'm sorry that you can hear my dog." He was sort of saying, "This is a banking call, and not ordinarily people expect banking calls to be clinical, don't they?" I just said to him, "Look, it's absolutely fine. I'm so glad you've picked up the phone and I can talk to you. I don't care what your dog's doing. It's you and your knowledge and your advice that I want to tap into. It doesn't matter to me that you're at home, because I'm at home too. You might hear the kettle go or the doorbell or whatever." So it's about a bit of empathy, isn't it, from both sides. And maybe it's about just readjusting your expectations, because if you understand what you want out of a call or a Zoom or an interaction, and you get that, hey presto, that's great, isn't it? Anything else that comes with it, we have to be a bit more empathetic about, a bit more understanding about.
Hopefully that's the bit I see as positive for I guess the youngsters of today, is not having to play in that fake corporate world. It's kind of now just a real world. As you say, people are empathetic, people don't really care about that sort of stuff now. It's really refreshing that they will come into a world where that corporate world, to a degree, will have been eroded completely, or at least I hope so.
Friends of mine have got kids who are of the age where they're just about to have their interviews for uni courses. So, I've just said, "Do you want to do a practice call? And I'll pretend to be whoever you want me to be. And you can just, give it a go. Don't let your interview time be your first time. Get comfortable." And I guess one of the things that we maybe forget or we assume is, when you're doing things like this, if something happens or you don't feel comfortable, just need to talk. You need to say, "Can I just be excused for a minute because I need to get a glass of water? Sorry, I didn't quite catch that because the internet connection's not consistent. So would you mind repeating it?" Not be afraid to make sure you talk and you could communicate and convey what's happening on your side when you're not sat in front of someone.
Yeah, you did right, and I think reframing is something that we discussed on some of these calls already, but it's something I've done when I've gone into schools and given career talks there. I say to people like, would you want to work for a massive global institution with flexible hours and benefits and career progression options? And they go, "Yeah, that sounds right. That's exactly what I want to do." It's like, okay, go and work for McDonald's, because that's exactly what they are. But if you were to say to someone who's 18, go and work at McDonald's part time, they're just like, I was like that. When I was like graduating, and I graduated in 2008 when we had the crash, and there were things available, because I was like, oh, I've got my degree and I should be getting this kind of role. I hadn't got it in my mind, and I ended up doing all sorts in that time in between. But that reframing is like, I think it does help people get their head around. If you just need a job at this moment in time, don't necessarily just go, "Oh, because I've always done this, I have to get a job doing this." If it's if you're thinking of it as an interim, if you think of it as, I need to pay the bills, or look, Christmas is here, there's going to be things available. I think that's going to help people as well.
Yeah, and don't forget your own mental well-being is so important. Being happy in the role you're currently doing is worth so much that people overlook. Obviously, money is important, but experience as well. So, yeah, it might not be directing you directly at the role that you want that's perfect in a year or 3 years or 5 years, but it's just experience that's going to tip you along and show that you were busy, you've got initiative, and all those good things.
Absolutely. If I could go back to doing bar work, I would do that in a heartbeat. I used to love it. Dealing with people and customer service is a great grounding, isn't it?
Just to take you slightly off on a tangent, Jodi, if you don't mind, is without getting too political, really keen to speak to people on these calls who are obviously experts in their own field. If you could influence the macro picture, whether that be political, government, health advice, that sort of thing, what, if anything, would you have changed, or what would you hope is going to change in terms of policy for whether it's education, whether it's the rules, the COVID rules, the restrictions that gets the economy going, with the sensible eye on the fact that we've obviously got to get through a pandemic?
I've actually really carefully watching this whole Build Back Better aspect that is coming about, because I don't know whether you'd call that corporate social responsibility. I have no idea. It doesn't really matter to me what the name is, but actually the community thing, whether it's a community that you live in, your community in your home and your work community, actually we should be thinking a bit more holistically about how we together as a whole nation just move things from this state that we've had to be in to protect ourselves to then being able to open out and then move forward for the benefit of everybody. And if we continue to see the parks full of bikes and dogs and walkers, that's something else that I think has been a real success, or a positive out of this negative. If as a nation we take to the fresh air instead of thoroughly sitting on the couch so much, and we continue that trend, I think that'll be really helpful and useful for us all.
And also, I know everyone wants to get away and go abroad, but I know we can't all do staycations, but actually investing in the local communities. I mean, the amount of times myself, my partner have decided not to go to Tesco and to go to the local shop or go to the local businesses to get something, cards, birthday presents. Shall I go to Moonpig? No, actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to that little tiny shop and get it from the doorway because I know she's open on a Saturday morning between 9 and 11. I think those sort of things, if we do that, that's going to reciprocate and goes from your point, Jodi, that's going to massively help.
There's a pub up the road from me, and it's quite a big space. It's got a massive restaurant as part of it. They've opened up the restaurant, filled it with shelves and fridges, and are now selling loads of local produce. They've now effectively started a new business that I genuinely think that when this kicks off again, when we're back to a bit more normal, they might go, do we keep that store or do we go back to the restaurant? For me, that's a massively brilliant example of being able to pivot your business, think outside the box, use the resources you've got available to you, and not stand still and go under.
Although, again, just to challenge that, if you look at how Silicon Valley looks at us in terms of how us being behind, I do think our hospitality sector does need to move into looking at some things that Europe have done for years, such as table service, such as they might be selling bread and patisseries in the morning with coffee, and it's a wine bar in the afternoon, and it's a restaurant in the evening. And I do think that expectation that a place is a more dynamic place in order to cover your overheads and make sure that you are always full. You can't just be a pub or you can't just be a restaurant that's fantastic on a Thursday, Friday night, but it's dead at the weekend because it's in central Manchester, or vice versa. I'd like to see that change happening quicker once we do reopen, because I think we'd all support that, particularly because a lot of businesses are closing their offices or downscaling their offices. There is going to be time now for that more flexible approach, and for me it does feel a bit more European. And there are loads of things about it. I think the apps are fantastic when the lockdowns are easing a little bit, to track people in pubs. I think they're really good, but good old table service. I've said for years, why do British pubs not do table service?
Only done it once in Didsbury, relatively close by, but wow, you don't half drink more. Unbelievable. I literally got up and nearly fell over.
Maybe it will also drive us to use our high streets differently, because for a long time there's been conversations about the death of our high street. Well, maybe we have to accept that the high street needs to be something different, and as we build it back, we make different decisions as to what our high streets are for and what's in there to facilitate a change. For some, is not necessarily easy or positive. But what comes out of it, you would hope, means that we just make different decisions, better decisions, and move it forward rather than trying to go back to what didn't work.
There's also a lot of businesses that don't want to be on the high street or couldn't be on the high street now. They couldn't justify it. And us as consumers need to buy those products. So there has to be a solution in there somewhere. Obviously, today we've covered so many topics, which has been brilliant. So thanks for your time. Has there been anything else that we've not touched on that you'd like to bring up about either 2021 or things that you've seen done brilliantly that we should all learn from?
Where my mind goes to with that is, who would I like to say thank you to as part of what's happened? So I would say thanks to my local butcher. My God, we've had meat fest. Thank you to the delivery guys, because they turn up at all sorts of hours, don't they? Although I haven't been able to see my mum, we've had more conversations than ever. Same with my sister. We have a family WhatsApp. It does really distill for you who your friends really are, because if you're friends and you're supporting each other, you find ways, don't you, to catch up with each other, be together but apart. There's been lots of things that has been different, but if you embrace that difference, it's it's a real positive.
And appreciate your time as well, Jodi. Really
thanks, Jodi. It's been great,
guys.
No worries.